Imagine a product more powerful than oil, more addictive than sugar, and more universal than smartphones. A product you probably bought today without even realizing it. That product is not a gadget, not a service, not even a luxury item. It is debt. For thousands of years, debt has quietly shaped civilizations. It has built empires and destroyed them, fueled revolutions and crushed them, created prosperity and poverty at the same time. But here's the paradox. Unlike gold or grain, debt is invisible. You can't touch it, yet it controls everything. And the strange truth is that humanity has not only accepted debt, we've celebrated it, institutionalized it, and turned it into the single most profitable product in human history. Debt, in its simplest form, is a promise. You take something today and agree to pay it back tomorrow. On the surface, it seems harmless, but hidden inside that promise is a mechanism so powerful that it reshaped the entire world: interest. The idea that money today could grow into more money tomorrow was revolutionary. It meant that time itself could be monetized. And once society accepted that logic, debt stopped being a temporary solution and started becoming the foundation of entire economies. In ancient Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago, debts were recorded on clay tablets. Farmers borrowed seed and tools from temples or local elites, promising to pay after harvest. But kings knew something dangerous. If too many citizens were crushed by obligations, society would collapse. So kings periodically declared debt jubilees, wiping the slate clean, freeing slaves, and allowing people to start over. Even in those early days, leaders understood that debt was both necessary and dangerous, both the lifeblood of commerce and the seed of unrest. The same idea appears in the Hebrew Bible, where debt forgiveness was commanded every 50 years. It wasn't mercy, it was survival. Without resets, entire populations would become enslaved to their creditors. Debt was powerful, but it had limits. For centuries, societies tried to control it, regulate it, or erase it when necessary. They treated it as fire, useful but deadly if left unchecked. Yet over time, human ingenuity found ways to turn debt from a dangerous tool into a weapon of profit. In ancient Rome, debt was both a contract and a trap. Citizens who couldn't repay were thrown into bondage, sometimes sold as slaves. Revolts and political reforms often centered around the question of debt relief. When Rome expanded, it brought not only legions but also systems of taxation and credit. Debt became a method of governance as much as a financial practice. During the Middle Ages, Christian Europe officially banned usury, the charging of interest. The Church declared it immoral, a sin against God. And yet, money still moved. Merchants and bankers invented clever disguises, loans hidden inside trade contracts, delayed payments that acted like credit, or new institutions that looked like anything but lending. In places like Florence, powerful families such as the Medici used these methods to build vast financial empires. They financed kings and popes, bought influence, and proved that debt was not only about money, it was about power. The real transformation came in the 17th century. In the Dutch Republic, fighting for independence from Spain, the government discovered a new model: selling bonds to its citizens. People invested in the state, received interest payments, and traded those bonds as if they were property. Suddenly, wars were no longer limited by the gold or silver in a king's treasury. They could be financed indefinitely by selling the future. England quickly copied the model. The creation of the Bank of England in 1694 formalized national debt as a permanent institution. For the first time, a government didn't just borrow in emergencies. It lived on debt, rolling it over endlessly. Bankers became indispensable to monarchs, and creditors realized that lending to governments was the safest investment in the world because states could always raise taxes. This innovation changed everything. Wars that once bankrupted kings became sustainable. Empires expanded, new markets opened, and every campaign created more opportunities for credit. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the bond markets in London, Paris, and Amsterdam were the beating heart of global finance. Armies marched, ships sailed, and colonies were conquered, all on borrowed money. Debt was no longer a temporary bridge, it had become the engine of empire. But it wasn't just nations that were transformed. As industrial capitalism spread, ordinary people were drawn into the cycle. Railroads, factories, and infrastructure projects were financed through bonds and bank loans. Workers earned wages from companies built on credit, and they themselves borrowed to buy homes, tools, and later consumer goods. Debt seeped into every layer of economic life. By the 20th century, it wasn't just the tool of governments or tycoons. It had become the everyday product of ordinary life. Mortgages, car loans, installment plans, and credit cards, the modern architecture of consumption was designed to normalize borrowing. Debt became invisible, part of the background of existence. Buy now, pay later. Enjoy today, worry tomorrow. For banks, this was a goldmine. Every payment of interest was a steady stream of profit. Unlike selling a physical product once, debt generated income month after month, year after year. It was the perfect business model. No factory, no raw materials, just signatures on paper and promises of repayment. The 20th century also brought debt to the global stage in new ways. The Bretton Woods Agreements of 1944 created institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, designed to lend to nations in need. But these loans came with conditions, structural adjustments that dictated economic policy. Entire countries were told what to cut, what to privatize, and how to manage their budgets, all in exchange for credit. Debt became not only profitable, but also a lever of political control. Nations that borrowed too much found their sovereignty compromised. Their policies were written not in their own capitals, but in Washington, New York, or Basel. Meanwhile, banks discovered that debt could be sold directly to households on an unprecedented scale. Homeownership became possible for millions, but only through 30-year mortgages. Consumer credit turned luxuries into everyday items at the price of monthly installments. By the late 20th century, debt was no longer shameful or rare. It was marketed like a product, celebrated as a path to prosperity. And once societies embraced this mindset, there was no going back. The problem was that the system became addicted. Banks didn't want loans repaid quickly. They wanted them extended, refinanced, rolled over again and again. The longer people stayed in debt, the more profitable they became. Governments learned the same lesson. Borrowing was easier than raising taxes. Politicians could promise benefits today while shifting the costs onto future generations. Central banks ensured that liquidity never dried dry, making the cycle seemingly endless. Debt stopped being an occasional tool and became the permanent architecture of the global economy. By the 1970s and 1980s, cracks began to show. Developing countries across Latin America, Africa, and Asia had borrowed heavily, encouraged by Western banks flush with recycled petrodollars. When interest rates spiked under U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, many nations found themselves unable to pay. The debt crisis exploded in 1982 when Mexico announced it could not meet its obligations. The solution was not relief, but more loans on harsher terms, overseen by the IMF. Debt became a trap, a cycle of borrowing to repay, with each round stripping more control from national governments. Ordinary citizens suffered austerity, unemployment, and inflation, while creditors collected their interest. At the same time, in the developed world, finance turned debt into a commodity of its own. Mortgages, car loans, and corporate bonds were bundled into securities